All right. How is everyone doing? As ever, thank you so much for coming. We're more than halfway through this boot camp. So today this morning we'll be doing, or I guess it's afternoon just, claim data conclusion questions. So the slightly more complex reading ones, to follow on from what we were doing yesterday evening. And then this evening, we finish our final kind of question type, the rhetorical synthesis. And then tomorrow, which will be super helpful throughout the day, you'll be able to do a whole past paper. So like I've said before, can everyone just put their full name in the chat so that we can do attendance? Thank you so much. I'll just start sharing my screen. I'm going to be going over some, we won't be doing the examples from this lesson deck really, but just like the techniques, and then we'll be doing examples from real papers because I think that's like more helpful at this stage. So just like it's been for other classes or the other ones this week, where we do some practice together as a group, and then you get to do some on your own, and then we review it as a group. All right, does anyone have any questions before we begin? No. Okay, fantastic. But do just put your hand up, whatever, type in the chat whenever you want to. Okay, cool. So claim data conclusion is like a grouping of several question types, which are part of the reading section of the digital SAT. They include things like inferences, central ideas and details, command of evidence, quantitative and textual. So, all right. When we get the claim questions, how does the author support, like which would support the, author's hypothesis or whatever, these like textual command of evidence questions. The first thing we always want to do is to make sure we're reading the question first. And yeah, so don't just like, it's just good to read the question, especially with the reading one, so that you get a sense of like what you're reading for or what you're going to need to do. So these are two-step problems. Often you need to figure out what the claim is and then the correct answer. And it's important to abbreviate unfamiliar words, speed through names, don't waste time figuring out how you pronounce them, and people's credentials, like if they're a professor. And again, as I told you earlier in the week, transitions are always important. Pay attention to transition words, as this often signals a shift in argument. All right, so if we look at a question like this, we don't want to start reading these names. What we want to do first is read the question, which is which finding from the model tests, if true, would most support Gimser and colleagues' hypothesis. So we know that we can speed up and shorten through these complicated names. And the first thing that we're looking for is the hypothesis. So here it would be that they hypothesized that the sail-like structure running down the back of the dinosaur, speed up through the name, improved the animal's success in underwater pursuits of prey species capable of making quick, evasive movements. So then knowing that, we then like get the answer choices. And so then we can see that like A doesn't support the hypothesis. B talks about water displacement, and we're not talking about that. And C, sorry, I've got something in the way, talks about battery power, and we don't know what this has to do with hunting success. So does this make sense to everyone that you're reading the question, finding the hypothesis, and then using the answer choices to sort of check against the hypothesis? It's easier to like focus on the hypothesis in your mind than trying to, contain the entire piece of text. Great. So sometimes it's with quotes. We know that some of us, we've been through this example before, but again, where we read the question. So what quote would illustrate the claim? So here we go. Yeah, we read the question first, and now we now know we need to find the claim, then apply it to the quotes. So the claim here is that Mr. Cornelius Johnson's appearance as conveying his exaggerated sense of his importance, and so then we know that he carried himself as if he was passing under his own triumphal arch. So that fits that. Okay, we're going to skip through these because I want to do examples from actual SATs. For those of you who just arrived, just pop your name in the chat. Okay, so some of these ones, I don't know how you all feel about data. Maybe the more science inclined of you don't hate it. I'm like not the biggest fan of data questions, but don't underestimate them. Like they can be kind of tricky. Stick to what the question is asking, like no assumptions. You may not need to read the whole paragraph. Sometimes you just need to read little bits of it. Really do make it clear what they are asking, what the question's asking, and most importantly, what the graph is actually telling you, right? So the way to read the graphs or the charts is to read the title and the key, and then look at the X and the Y axis, and then make sense of extremes. So if there's like a data set and a real outlier, often like figuring out what's going on there will really help you understand it as a whole. So we can do like one quick one here, even though I know a lot of us have done this before. So in this one, we like look at the title and the key. So it's the urban population of Algeria, France, Japan, and Nigeria. We can see which line is which. Then we read these axes. It's the percentage living in cities and the year. Then we can just sort of like skip, like we're saying which choice most effectively uses the data. We look at the last sentence here. We don't really need to read all of this, but we say the main contributors to the world's urbanization since 1970 have been countries like Algeria, whose population went from, and we can see that the correct answer here is from like around 40% to more than 70%. Great. Any questions on that before we move on to the next kind? Perfect. All right. These are conclusions. These conclusions on these are inferences questions. So always read the question first. This will help you recognize that it's a conclusion question. It will often say like, which choice would most logically complete the text? This is an open book text, therefore you must be able to conclude the answer via the information in the passage, right? Like what the correct answer will become clear through the information in the passage. Again, abbreviate unfamiliar words, speed through names and credentials, and pay close attention to transition words. So here we've got which choice most logically completes the text. We're like, oh, this is a conclusion question. We jump to the last sentence. This will give us what we're looking for when we read the rest of the passage. So the scientists therefore imply that. Then, then like the correct answer here is this, because the text says that some scientists can't explain why prolonged deep sleep is so widespread, given that the known benefits of sleep don't seem to make up for how vulnerable it leaves an animal, which then suggests that prolonged deep sleep probably has unknown benefits that we're like not aware of that make up for the vulnerability. Does that make sense? So you can see if I go back, that, we've got this thing saying that like, oh wait, that's not. Say like, from an evolutionary standpoint, that sleep leaves an animal vulnerable and the benefits seem insufficient. All right, perfect. So if we look at another one here, same approach, C logically completes the text and jump to the last sentence. Why do we find fewer species higher up on a mountain? And we'll just kind of run through this quite quickly, because the text states that adaptations to cold temperatures have high energy costs, and so the lower the temperature, the fewer species have evolved to survive it. It also says that the temperature gets colder as elevation increases. So from this, we can infer that the reasons that few species exist very high up on a mountain is because few species have the adaptations necessary to survive the cold temperatures at those elevations. So as you can see, these are like two-step problems. We're like reading the text and having to come up with a logical conclusion based on the information in the text. It's not like we're being expected to know outside knowledge. It's literally just like the steps of logic from what we're given in the text to the conclusion. So it's not like you need to like know stuff about this before, which is nice. All right, let's just go to the last kind. All right, and again with the central ideas and details questions, you want to read the question first, and often these are two-step problems that you need to figure out the claim and then the correct answer. And again, to abbreviate unfamiliar words, I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, and I am, but it's going to drill into your minds. Speed through names and credentials and paying attention to transition words. So I think we've done a lot of these examples in class. So I'm going to swap the share from my iPad. So if anyone has any questions now, it's a good time to ask. So we're going to do these questions from module 1 together as a group, and then you'll do, this is from Digital SAT 2, and then we will do, I'll have you do module 2 questions on your own, and then hopefully if there's time, we can do some more questions either together or on your own. All right, SAT 2. All right. We're starting with a data question here. As you can see, we've got the chart. So the first thing that we want to do is to read the question. So which choice best describes data from the graph that support the researcher's conclusion? And then we're seeing like what the title of the graph is. So here we have the average number of individuals reporting directly to CEOs, and the average number of individuals all right, yeah, it's the same thing, in different years, and it's managers and department leaders. And so then we want to see next, what we want to be reading for here is what is the researcher's conclusion. So according to the researchers, the findings suggest that across the years analyzed, there was growing interest among CEOs in connecting with more departments in their companies. So everyone have a go at answering this, like which is the correct answer based on the data in the chart and the conclusion. And then once you've got your answer, pop it in the chat. And to those of you who just arrived, just put your full name in the chat. Thank you so much. All right. Well, here the correct answer is D. That the average number of department leaders reporting directly to their CEO grows over time. We can see like this one, and then here, and then here. So there's this upward trend. And the reason why it's D is that in the conclusion says that there was a growing interest among CEOs in connecting with more departments in their companies. So we want to like, the department leaders would be like a good indication of like how CEOs are connecting with more departments. So that's not the C, I think someone put, but it's just not as like good an indication of that. Fantastic. All right, let's have a go at number 15. So we like read the question first here. So it says, which finding, if true, would most directly undermine Foster's hypothesis? Two things to point out here. They're not always questions that ask about supporting the hypothesis. So we need to find something that we need an answer which would undermine the hypothesis. So do like keep in mind that like sometimes it's going to go against what they want, like what the scientists would have thought. And now we need to find Foster's hypothesis. So when we, Foster hypothesized that damage to eelgrass roots increases the plant's rate of sexual reproduction. This in turn boosts genetic diversity, which benefits the meadow's health overall. We may need to then like scan through the top bit of the text or read through the whole thing. It's like you don't only have to read the hypothesis often, but it's like helpful to sort of read it with like taking that out as like more important. So everyone take a minute to like read through question 15. I can try and make it a little bigger. And then let me know what you think the answer is. All right, any other answers? Let's have some more coming through. Anyone else? Doesn't matter if you're wrong, we'll go over why it's right. No one else can see it but me, and I'm really not going to judge you. In fact, I'll just be happy that you've taken part. Thank you, people. All right, perfect. So the correct answer here is C. At several sites not included in the study, eelgrass meadows health correlates negatively with the length of residence and size of otter populations. In the text, it says that it suggests, and I'll find a bit, that the otters, the damage to the eelgrass roots caused by otters increases the plant's rate of sexual reproduction and boosts genetic diversity, which benefits the health overall. So if the health was, if like a big otter population should therefore make a healthy eelgrass population because they're damaging the roots, which is making them reproduce and like making them like more robust, right? And then in this case, it says that like the health actually was like this finding is if the health was less good because of the otters, that goes against the hypothesis. Does that make sense to everyone? This answer B, that it's just like it's not that I think some people chose. It's that it wouldn't really be within terms of it because like I'm sure there are otter populations with no eelgrass meadow, like not all you know, not all otter populations live amongst eelgrass, so it's not like a relevant thing that would like undermine the hypothesis. All right, any questions on that before we move on to number 16? Okay, great. All right, so here we can see, we read the question, which choice most logically completes the text? This then we know is a conclusion question. My handwriting is terrible today. All right. And so we want to be like reading the text, like, but we read the last sentence first. Thus, those who primarily view Zelda as an inspiration for F. Scott's writings, what? So then we go back and read the whole thing. So scholars have noted that F. Scott Fitzgerald's writings were likely influenced in part by his marriage to Zelda Fitzgerald, but many don't recognize Zelda as a writer in her own right. Indeed, Zelda authored several works herself, such as the novel Save Me the Waltz and numerous short stories. So what do we think the answer is here? Okay, we've got quite a range here. Fantastic. So the text is like, the focus of the text is like it's Zelda Fitzgerald here who's the focus of the text, right? So this I think a couple of you put A, but we're not really like focusing on like why F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote. Instead it's saying that like I think the key bit here of like what the focus is that but many don't recognize her as a writer in her own right. And so what we want to say is that like thus those who primarily view her as an inspiration risk misinterpreting the full range of her contributions to literature, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions on that before we move on to question 17? Risk, yeah, I do understand that sometimes the wording's weird, like yeah, that makes sense. Like I do think something's like I guess like I suppose it's trying to be a bit more neutral than saying that they're like misrepresenting her like in full, but like yeah, it's a slightly odd phrasing. But sometimes like you will encounter you know a strange word choice in the answer. In some of the example ones from like the slides, Mike and I just fixed the wording in some of them because they were really weird. All right, fantastic. There was one which was definitely about an abstract artist, but they called it unrealistic, and I was like, this isn't the same thing. Like we need to change it. All right, let's look at number 17. Okay, so again here, we have a conclusion question. So we know that it's that, then we have, we need to like, the first thing we need to read is like the final sentence. So they found that tortoise hatchlings showed significant preference for the image, suggesting what? So, among social animals that care for their young, such as chickens, macaque, monkeys, and humans, newborns appear to show an innate attraction to faces and face-like stimuli. Elisabetta Versace and her colleagues used an image of 3 black dots arranged in the shape of eyes and a nose or mouth to test whether this trait also occurs in testudo tortoises, which live alone and do not engage in parental care. They found that tortoise hatchlings showed a significant preference for the image suggesting what? Yeah, perfect. So most of you saying B, which is the correct answers here, which is that like they should not assume that there's an innate attraction is necessarily an adaptation related to social interaction or parental care because of these tortoises who don't have that, having it. I think there's a couple of choices for C, that we didn't get any evidence in the text for whether it's learned or innate. It's more just that we don't know. It's not, we can't assume that it's entirely related to social interaction and parental care because these unparented, antisocial little tortoises like faces. Any questions on that before we move on to number 18? Okay, perfect. All right. Again, another conclusion question. Which choice most logically completes the text? So then we'll read our last 9. Thus, some scholars have concluded that. So, compiled in the late 1500s, largely through the efforts of indigenous scrolls, Cantares Mexicanos is the most important collection of poetry in classical Nahuatl, the principal language of the Aztec Empire. The poems portray Aztec society before the occupation of the empire by the army of Spain, and marginal notes in Cantares Mexicanos indicate that much of the collection's content predates the initial invasion. Nonetheless, some of the poems contain inarguable references to beliefs and customs common in Spain during this era. Thus, some scholars have concluded that. And then keeping in mind here that we've got these transitions here and here. So what do we think the answer is here? Great, a couple of ones coming in. Okay, so a mixed bag here of answers. So the correct answer that we have is A. So that while the content largely predates the invasion, it also contains additions made after. This is like the most logical one. We're saying that like, even in here, we've been given the line that indicate that much of the content predates the initial invasion. I think some of you also went for, so that it would be like, it was mostly like pre-colonial and then a little bit of influence past. The problem with the other answers that I think some of you went for is like, and see, we don't have, there's no evidence in the text for this. It's just an assumption. Like we can only answer this based on the evidence in the text. So C doesn't work because we have no textual evidence for them borrowing from the literary traditions of other societies. You know, it's just not there. So we can't logically answer that. And again, there's nothing to suggest it's coincidental. We don't have the information in the text. I don't think anyone put B. All right, did that make sense? We need to be using what's in the text to answer the question, and A, we have like with a means to answer that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just kind of confused because the thing that's throwing me off is it says contains additions made after the invasion, but isn't it kind of suggesting that it was influential even before the invasion?
Yeah, but the content, it has like, it's like an extra bit, like, you know, if you revise it or put a footnote or something. So the kind of influence of it before the invasion can still be the case, but then the like final form might have, you know, like you know, in Shakespeare there's like 2 versions of the plays written at different times, you know. That like these texts could have just been updated or a new edition or whatever, you know.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for raising your hand. It's nice to hear a voice. I appreciate it. All right. Oh, there's one here. We know that some was made after because some of the poems contain inarguable reference to the beliefs and customs common in Spain, which is the kind of like cultural influence of the colonial power that comes in, right? They wouldn't have like known, the Aztec people wouldn't have like known about Spain until, and their customs until they were colonized. So that's like the sort of inclusion of like Spanish customs suggests that like there was some additions were made after the invasion. Does that make sense? Perfect. Great. You're all stars. Thank you for asking questions. It makes me sure that I know what I'm teaching as well. So that's nice. I can feel really confident. And also these are not always easy. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I just don't know. So we can figure it out together. All right, number 19. Yet another conclusion question. So which choice most logically completes the text? So we read first for the last sentence. The results of the study, therefore, that's not necessarily helpful, but we know we'll be looking at the results. And then we can read the whole thing. In a study of the cognitive abilities of white-faced capuchin monkeys, researchers neglected to control for the physical difficulty of the tasks they used to evaluate the monkeys. The cognitive abilities of monkeys given problems requiring little dexterity, such as sliding a panel to retrieve food, were judged by the same criteria as were those of monkeys given physically demanding problems, such as unscrewing a bottle and inserting a straw. The results of the study, therefore, what? This is SAT 2. So yeah, just have a look at this one. It's from module 1 of SAT 2, if you're following along in your own thing. I'll be sending out SAT 2 in a chat like after this shortly, so you can do your own practice. But yeah, let me know what you think the answer is. What do we think about this monkey study? Capuchin monkeys are super cute. So we're saying that let's go through what's happening in the study. Researchers, so they were giving these monkeys these tasks to evaluate their cognitive, so their thinking abilities, right? But the researchers didn't make any account for the fact that some of the monkeys were being given really simple, easy tasks like opening a hatch, and then other monkeys were being given difficult tasks like unscrewing a bottle and putting a straw in it, right? And so some monkeys were being given something simple and some monkeys were being given something hard, right? So the results of the study then could suggest that there are differences. We could say that so if we say that all the oh, these monkeys, the group of monkeys who were just opening something are all have really high cognitive functions, and a group of monkeys that were given something really hard, for example, had really low cognitive functions, it's suggesting that it could suggest that there are differences in cognitive ability, even though they don't actually exist, because there wasn't a control test of what the monkeys were given. Okay. Does that one, that's not really making sense. Okay, so monkeys, this group of monkeys given a really easy task involving 2 blocks, right? This group of monkeys given a really difficult task involving all this stuff. And then we're going to take how they fare on this and say it makes the same, and be like, these monkeys are stupid and these monkeys are clever. But it doesn't make sense because they've been given separate tasks, right? So it could show that it make it seem that these monkeys are clever and these monkeys are stupid, even when those differences don't exist. Because if we made these monkeys do that task, they do badly, and these monkeys do that task, they do well. Does that make a little bit more sense? I'm sorry, I'm so bad at drawing a monkey. Oh, right. Yeah. This one sounds like it could be right, but it's not that it's only indicative of the cognitive abilities of one kind of monkey. It's that the test isn't even testing the cognitive abilities of any monkeys. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. You've all got it. Okay, cool. So my terrible little monkey drawings helped. Maybe I'll draw more little animals. Yeah, so it's it's not it, and I don't know what other answers were. Yeah, and maybe, but also the evidence for this, we're not talking about the differences between them and in the wild, so it's just not relevant to the text. All right, fantastic. Thank you all so much for bearing with me with my silly drawings, and I'm really glad you've got it. So what we're gonna do now, and I'll put it in the chat, is I would like you guys to do the I'll just make sure I'm sending this to everyone. This is SAT 2. So click on that, get that up. We're going to be doing on module 2, questions 10 to 17. And then you'll have like 10 minutes for this. Okay. Let's figure this out at the end. Let's start on module 2 questions, and then we just stay at the end, and I'll make sure we've got it all from the right place. So yeah, it's paper 2. All right, so we're going to start with module 2 questions. What did I say? 10 to 17. So starting on this political orientation one. Can everyone give me like thumbs up, smiley faces, anything to indicate that you're ready to do it? Fab. I have way too many tabs open. All right, cool. So we're starting on this. Everyone else ready? Anyone need more time? Okay. I'll like put the answers for the questions that we just did in the chat. But for now, here's 10, take 10 minutes, and it's questions 10 to 17. Okay, great. How did everyone get on with that? Let's have a look. Starting with question 10. Before I ask for answers, did anyone have any reflections on like how it felt? Was it tricky, easy, fine, awful? Great. All right. What did everyone get for question 10? All right. Yeah, all correct answers here. Well done, everyone. Sorry. At each point on the claim here is that the likelihood of voting is driven by potential voters' confidence in their assessments. Essentially, the more informed voters are, the more confident they are at evaluating whether candidates share their views and are thus more likely to vote. And here we can see that at each point on the political orientation scale, high information, these dark columns, high information voters were more likely than low information voters to vote. Fantastic. All right, number 11. What did everyone get for 11? Yeah, so great. Yeah, here. And again, to keep in mind, we're looking for something that would weaken. This should like set our alarm bells off. The student's conclusion. The student here concluded that the reduction in the spider population count in the enclosure with lizards by day 30 was entirely attributable to the presence of the lizards. But we can actually see that the spider population count also substantially declined in no lizards. So it can't be only the lizards that declined it. Great. All right, number 12. Which finding, if true, would most strongly support the team's conclusion? And the team concluded that the cattle were likely raised closer to human settlements where sheep and goats were allowed to roam further away. Okay, great. So our first bit is that they looked at the bones and they said that the wild plants were the sheep and goats diets, where the cattle's diet was like cultivated crops. So further like evidence for this conclusion that cattle were close by to humans, whereas goats and whatever were further away, is if we analyze the animal bones, and that it also consisted of wheat, which was another cultivated crop. So it's just another piece of evidence that they're like close to the cultivation, and that they're so therefore close where the goats are further away. That the millet would undermine the claim, not support it, with B. That would be to undermine it, because the goats don't have millet. Millet is grown near, we have humans growing millet. And so the cows are eating that. This does not look like a cow, but the goats are over here eating something else. So if the goats have millet in it, it would undermine the claim. Whereas we want to support the claim, which is if humans are also growing wheat, and that's found in the cattle's bones, then that shows that they're close to the humans. Does that make sense? Or does anyone have any more questions before we move on to the next one? Great. Okay, let's look at number 13. Okay, so which finding, if true, would support? So we're looking for support, not undermine one. And then we need to find the claim. And the claim here is that they claim that endothermy would have enabled the mosasaurs to include relatively cold polar waters in their range. Great. Any other answers? To hear from lots of you. You know, it really doesn't matter if you got it wrong. That way we can like go through them. So don't feel. Just wait for a couple others. Any others? All right. Fine. Okay, yeah. So here the correct answer is C. So they're saying that if these mosasaurs were endothermic, meaning that they're producing heat from the inside like we do, that they'd be able to go into colder places. And so if the evidence that would support this would be if they're fossils being found in regions near the poles, like cold places and regions where non-endothermic marine reptiles, where there aren't non-endothermic ones. So that would show that they were endothermic. Does that make sense? If there was this evidence where their fossils were being found. We just don't have evidence in the text for that. It's just not, it's not a conclusion that's like really based in, like, because with this one, yeah, we know that it's near the poles. Like, we don't have, yeah, if they're found near the poles. So we've not actually been talking about the poles until the answer choices. It's not in the, oh, they could have polar waters, but yeah, it's not that we're assuming that it's cold. All right, perfect. Any more questions on number 13 before we move on to 14? All right. All right, number 14. What did everyone get? Perfect. Yeah. So here we're saying that the hypothesis is that a decline in the population of these sharks near the Atlantic coast led to a decline in the population of oysters. We know that the sharks don't eat oysters, but they do consume rays, which are the main predators of the oysters. So basically, cow-nosed rays have increased as dusky sharks have decreased, right? That would be good, like this would support the hypothesis, because like less sharks should mean lead to more rays and fewer oysters. So if these rays have increased while the sharks have, that would like support the hypothesis of the decline in the population, that the decline of the population of sharks led to the decline of the population of oysters, because the middle predator can eat the oysters. It doesn't make, this would undermine this hypothesis, because this is suggesting that like if there's loads of rays, there's also loads of oysters. It's just not the best answer. The abundance to be greater with all of them, it's going against what's eating what. All right. I know we've only got a few minutes left and we've still got some to go through, but I'll be able to stay at the end to go over any extra ones. But I think let's just quickly go through the answers so that everyone has them. What did everyone get for 15? Okay. So here the answer is C. So the claim is that the traditional view is that voting doesn't change your attitude towards the candidate. So say you like vote for Biden, that would suggest that you won't change your opinion of Biden, during his time in office because you voted for him, right? So we need to say like weaken the claim of the traditional view, so that you'd vote for Biden and then you wait 2 years and you're still like happy about it. Whereas it says in things in answer C weakens it by saying that those who voted in an election actually had more polarized opinions, like they liked him more or they hated him more than when 2 years later than those who didn't vote. So that actually like voting in an election, this finding, it actually shows that you have a greater difference of opinion instead of the opinion not changing. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. Let's move on to 16. Which choice best describes the data from the graph and support the conclusion? Anyone else? Yeah, the answer here is that the lowest performing ETL applied through. So the claim is that spray coating hold promise for improving the power conservation efficiency. And so here the lowest performing ETL applied through spray coating had a higher power conversion efficiency than even the highest one through spin, right? It's even higher than this one through spin. So that supports it. All right, great. Last question. And then I will be able to stay if anyone still has bits that they don't understand. What did everyone get? Which finding, if true, most directly supports the journalist's claim that Enwezo sought to remedy this deficiency not by focusing solely on modern African artists, but by showing how their work fits into the larger context of global modern art and art history? Any other answers? Yep, perfect. This piece of this finding that he created, like, brought work for this exhibition, brought works from African artists together with pieces from other countries like Andy Warhol and David Siqueiros, because that's showing that he was putting their work into the larger context of global modern art and art history. All right, great. So anyone who needs to go, you're very welcome to. Please make sure that your name is in the chat. This afternoon, we'll be doing rhetorical synthesis, which we've not done yet. So it's new, so not a review. If you can't make it this afternoon, we'll be going over it in class again next week. And I can stick around if you don't understand any of those questions, because I know we had to rush slightly at the end. So they are just a bit slower and harder than other ones, which is why we save them to near the end. But yeah, hopefully see lots of you this afternoon, or like stick around now. Why not A on 17? On this one? Yeah, okay. Because it's not putting the African artist in a larger global context of art and art history. It might be in Germany, but that's not what's in the exhibition. It's just it's just a retrospective of a sculptor's work. It's just devoted to a Black artist. It doesn't have this like putting the Black art in conversation, like the Black artist's art in conversation with the wider global context. Does that make sense? No problem.